You know, after 630 plus episodes, nobody's really asked me a lot of questions. Well, that ends today with a new feature called Kenn and the Kid. I got a millennial who's going to ask me some questions on my own doggone show. This is going to be a long episode, so sit back and relax, and you might hear something from your friend and your brother from another mother that you never heard before, and it might even blow your socks off. You've survived another week. Thank you for sharing, supporting, and staying a faithful friend. This is the Black Man with a Gun Show podcast, The Peacemaker. Since 2007, with over 200 plus game changers and guests, American history, gun culture, and a conscientious look at our community.
I'm back, baby!
You know, even if you're a long-time listener of this podcast, there's some stuff about me that you don't know. You're going to hear it today. And if you're new, welcome. 2020 has been a monster, and it's a good chance to reset, unwind, reassess, and learn. Over the week, we lost the great, mighty Jeff Quinn. And if you didn't know him, he was a good brother. Had his own website, was a gun reviewer, was an advocate, activist. Does some good YouTube stuff, just like you and me. Did it his way. And this week he passed away. The mighty Jeff Quinn of gunblast.com. Since 2014, I have been a member of the Crossbreed holster family. If you carry concealed, get a holster that supports not only your firearm, but your freedom, the faith, and this brother with a try-it-free lifetime guarantee. Crossbreedholsters.com. Crossbreedholsters.com. All right, this week I want to start something new, and it's up to you to let me know whether it worked or not. But there's an element of our society, element in my life, of people who are, I would say, in my son's age and younger. We affectionately call them millennials and Generation X and Y, and there's even some Zs in there. And they have different questions. They have different responses to the same stimuli that we get. And I want to open myself up to this audience to learn, because it goes two ways. Communication is a two-way street. If you think you're just supposed to be talking at people and not processing, then you're wrong. I've been around long enough to know that I can learn from everybody that's doing the right stuff. So this week begins a new chapter of that life for me. And I got a guy, we're just going to call him the Kid for now, even though he's a grown-ass man, as they say in other places. Nic Thompson, welcome to the show. He is the podcaster, part 2, co-host of Analytic Endeavors. And welcome to the show, man, as we start this new element called Kenn and the Kid.
Ken, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here and look forward to this.
Man, what burning questions do you have for me? What's on top of the mind of those in your age group, or how can we even just start this mess? I mean, I've been around the planet. You might have heard the show a few times. And is there anything that you want to just kick it off with that might be of interest to other people in your demographic?
Sure. I think that I would like to hear the Kenn Blanchard story, and I would like to hear some of the background and hear how you got to this place and how I think understanding your background lends to understanding how you think about the world, right? So if somebody hears a certain opinion or certain, thing that they might not agree with, I think that an episode where you can point back and say, hey, I talked about that, and this is why I feel that way. And sure, you may not agree with me, but, these are the life experiences to get me to this opinion, I think is pretty valuable for people to understand you more. So in this, I just wanted to ask a bunch of questions and get your hard-fought wisdom on it. Whereas I am a grown ass man, as you said. I'm 28 and I have two kids. But one, the title works very well, Ken and the Kid. So I think we wanted to stick with that. And two, when I think about you and I think about asking you questions, we've had conversations in the past where you've completely flipped the script on me. I think that I know where you're going to go with something and it's completely different, which keeps our conversations interesting, frankly, because I never know what you're going to say. But I think a platform where I can ask a bunch of those kind of questions would be kind of helpful and interesting, frankly. So I think a good place to start is the beginning for Kenn Blanchard, and tell us where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
All right, cool. Without trying to bore you, grew up kind of poor, but I didn't know I was poor. And right around the early 60s, my mom had me, and I stayed with my maternal grandmother whenever I wasn't in school. So as a little kid, throughout from little kid all the way to high school, every long summer, every long weekend, every chance she got, she sent me back to the South, to this little rural town that doesn't even exist anymore. It's about a mile and a half from the North Carolina border, where I lived like I was in 1940s with no running plumbing, and didn't pay much attention to any of that until the 80s, when I was trying to show people where I was from. And it's like, wow, you live like this? And I hadn't noticed what I didn't have at the time. Well, as I grew into the 80s and the 90s and went into the military, I served almost 5 years in the Marines. I was that kid who had parents from the 60s. So I grew up remembering the March on Washington, remembering all the civil rights stuff, remembering the same stuff that's happening right now almost as a little baby, and watching and listening to my parents who had friends who were Panthers, had friends who were Muslims, had friends who were radicals, had friends, and I was the product of all of that. So when I became a man myself, I was trying to find out where I was going to be on this planet with all my background. And I wanted to be the middle of the road guy, the peace guy. I didn't want to be like my uncle on one end. I want to be like my father on another end. I wanted to be me. I didn't want to be trapped in this void of color and race. And I even joined the military. The biggest thing I did was the biggest recruitment thing for me was when this guy said, in the Marines, we only have one color. It was green. That was I didn't care about the job. I didn't care about the wars that could happen. I didn't care about anything. I wanted to be in a place where nobody cared my race, my age, none of that stuff, that we were all a brotherhood. That was the appeal for me. And all the shows that I watched had the same thing. I was a big Star Trek fan for the same reason, even though it was a fictitious science fiction movie. But they were dealing with some cultural issues, and all that stuff stayed with me. Because I remember hearing my dad, my stepfather, scream at me because I was watching an Elvis Presley movie, and I couldn't figure out why he was so angry. I later heard that same rage later when I played John Wayne on my podcast. I heard the same rage when I wore a black beret at work. Folks were like, "What are you doing?" Or even I had a small bow tie once when everybody was wearing ties, and they were accusing me of being from the Nation of Islam. I've been around and accused of being too black, or black on the inside, or white on the inside and black on the inside. I've been accused of being on each end of the spectrum. I've been the radical guy who was trying to get people to do stuff right. I've been the person who's, why do you listen to country music? It's like, I also listen to funk. I listen to all things. And that struggle has made me appreciate anybody that's going through something. Cause I know I've seen both. I've seen folks abused on both sides. I remember this guy, he was in our barracks, and he had a tattoo of the Southern Cross on his arm, and the Marines went crazy on him. It's like, well, either have to get this thing taken off, or you can't roll your sleeves down because it's going to anger all the dark green Marines. Then I found out that they also had a color issue. We were light green, dark green. And so that green thing was a hoax, but I fell for it. Well, anyway, And this guy he was adamant about him not being racist, that I was still his brother. It's just that he had a background and a family that really appreciated their Civil War heritage. And I had to look at this guy cockeyed my whole life because I heard what he was saying. But 99% of the rest of the world that was doing anything with the Confederate flag would probably lynch my behind if I wasn't careful. So it was this, I hear him, I love him, but how do you justify that? How do you, so with that in mind, knowing how I felt about him, I learned about people's other tolerances of me. Like, when I got accused of being a Black Panther in the Marine Corps, I almost got kicked out one time, only because I was reading the books. And to have somebody throw stuff at you that you haven't done, that's like one of the worst crimes in the world, is to be accused of a crime you didn't do. So I'm real lenient and wait to learn about somebody else's past, learn from their optic, and it's colored me through my whole life. But it's also been, I don't know, interesting journey, just so I can say. And I still got my issues. I'm still struggling with some stuff, but I'm willing to listen and hear what other people are doing. So that kind of shaped my whole world, just coming from that realm.
See, this is why I enjoy talking to you, Ken, because you've had such a varied and wide-ranging set of experiences in your life that I do feel like you are in a unique position to speak to and with a lot of different people. And, you know, I see a lot of people who say, I'm trying to understand the other side, or say, well, you know, I understand your feelings, but, you know, there's always that but, right? Like, and people are always waiting for their turn to talk as well.
Yeah.
Particularly in the show business industry, right? You've interviewed a lot of people over the years. Yeah. I'm sure you've seen a heck of a lot of that. But I don't get that sense with you. And my gut feeling on you is you are truly trying to tread that middle ground and walk between these people and try to extend a hand to each side. Frequently, especially in today's political climate, you know, we're recording this in 2020. It's been a heck of a year so far, and an election coming up. It seems less and less and less like people are even willing to extend that hand to other people, that is particularly that they don't agree with. So that is one thing that really attracted me to your media, your attitude about things. You know, that it's something that I can believe in, honestly. And even though we may not agree on everything, though it seems like we do agree on quite a bit, I respect the journey that got you to your opinion. And I think that people should start respecting that on all sides. Yeah. Do you agree, disagree? For people who, you know, it seems like me and you are kind of on the more conservative side of the middle road, but I don't know. I feel very similarly, where I try to walk that middle ground because I do know people on both sides, and I do try to extend, you know, my hand. Do you feel like it's particularly difficult these days? Are you running into more difficulty, or do you feel like people need this now more than ever?
Here's my secret to this whole thing, and why I think like I do. I've been in some situations where I've been stuck with somebody, and I've learned that if you are stuck with somebody, it can be an elevator for more than 3 or 4 hours. It can be on a desert island. You can make an exotic fantasy if you want in your head, but you will have to change how you talk to them, how you relate to that person when that other person is all you have. And if you put that in the perspective, it changes everything. I've seen, I don't think it's happened to me, but I've seen where was stuck in an elevator for real, for like 4 hours, and a complete stranger, by the time we were rescued, you knew their whole life. You knew what they valued. You kind of liked them. And if they were of the opposite sex, or you were attracted to them in the beginning, or maybe even while you were there, there was some stuff that happened afterwards. I mean, there's probably some psychological thing about being stuck with somebody and having like a relationship afterwards that doesn't last. But the fact that if you are minus a whole bunch of stupid stuff, like some of the values and stuff that we do that really don't matter, and you're back down to your core of just humanity, you could probably like that person and work with that person. So I try to take everything back to that. Like, all right, if I'm stuck in a foxhole with this person, can we make it out? Can we enjoy the rest of this day? And that changes my dynamic on everything. I don't care what they're wearing. I don't care what they're saying, but it's their essence, the stuff that they're coming out with, that I can like feel they're a good person. That's my thing. If they're either good or bad, the rest of it is extra.
Gotcha. Interesting. Do you feel, so it sounds like your gift is in empathy, maybe in connecting with people. And, a lot of people don't even try to understand another point of view. And it sounds like that's the first thing you try to do with somebody. Is that correct? Or
yeah, if you look at Castaway with what's the name of that guy?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks went nuts because he didn't have another person to talk to. He had to create one with Wilson. If you have a Wilson, a real person, I don't care what your political thing was before, that'll be your best friend eventually, because the two of you will connect. And I just put that in my head that if the rest of the world dissolved, the person I'm talking to right now, could I connect? And most of the time, yeah. So stay there. That's my piece. Yeah, they're going to deviate and say stuff that I go, I don't know if I agree with that. But if I'm staying with you long enough, I'm going to learn why. And that happened to me so many times in my life that had to change me. So that's my bottom line.
Gotcha. I think that's very uncomfortable for people, right? And it seems like even more recently, where if you don't agree on something, then a certain political side might call it hate speech, or another political side might call it commie talk or something. Like I'm just trying to think of examples. How do you see this? This is where I wanted to go with this kind of episode. How do you stick in there with somebody? Because I think I will have the best of intentions to kind of reach out to both sides and walk that middle ground, but I get frustrated really, really easily with people. And that frequently kind of, unfortunately, takes over my maybe good goals of trying to reach out for people. How do you, and it sounds like it's been your life experiences that you can stick in there with people, but do you have any advice on doing that, on sticking with people that you maybe vehemently disagree with?
I'll tell you how it happened. The first time I remember it happening, I was 19, and I was put into a room with a guy from Kansas who was in the rodeos. And this guy said, we had one colored guy in our whole county. And I don't mind you guys, you just stay on your side of the room. But I was stuck with this guy for the next year. And I had to be patient. I think the time thing was everything. I had to, second to knowing that everybody's got something that you can connect with, I've never seen a storm last forever. So even though on the onset, me and this guy, nothing in common. He told me right off the bat, he gave me some nicknames for some racial slurs I had never heard in my life and thought it was hilarious. So in the beginning, that's the lightning, that's the thunder, that's all the stuff, the rain, the whole, what you call our relationship sucked. I couldn't stand this dude. But the longer I was with him, I would see stuff that I didn't mind. Like, I'm like, all right, why do you wear that giant buckle? And he would say, I got this buckle when I won the rodeo and blah, blah, blah. And I had never known about rodeo people. And this thing was like a sense of pride for this guy, this giant buckle. And I was like, so that's like an award that you're walking around with, like a wrestler. And he was like, yeah, basically, I wrestle steers and I ride. And I thought, man, that's pretty good. And then the fact that I appreciated that was my end. And then finally, we're listening to music one day, and he was on my stuff really bad, because it was back in the days of the boom boxes and giant speakers, And if you had like a lot of money, you would buy a bigger stereo so you could blast out your neighbor. And he was into old time country. And in my whole life, I had heard that was redneck music. That was the people who string you up and hang you. I'd heard all this stuff before. And then he would sing this song and say, I am a redneck. And I'm thinking, all right, so I can't sleep with this dude. I can't turn my back on him. This guy's the enemy. But then listening to the music itself, I love music. I heard a blues riff in this music. And I said, that's the same song speeded up a little bit from this song right here. And he was like, oh, I ain't listening to that jungle stuff you listening to. And
oh, jeez.
oh man, it was rough, right? It was a rough couple of months. But the longer we were together, I seen them two cowboy boots clicking a couple times as he was listening to the beat. And he goes, oh man. All right, he said, that ain't too bad. And I'm thinking, neither is Hank Williams. And he's like, oh, now you're talking. And then the music changed us. The belt buckle changed us. And then he says, what else about you, I forgot what he called me, that I don't know too much about. Within a year, the wall had fell down. And we did slug it out one time. It got physical. But everybody thought that was funny because it was a setup. They put me in that guy's room on purpose, hoping that I'd be miserable the rest of my life. But I learned that even with your enemy, there's some stuff that probably you got in common. And if you have time is a big thing. The storm wasn't going to last forever. We were going to either kill each other or work together. And it finally worked out. So much so that I bought a pair of fake cowboy boots. They had like a zipper on the side. They only went to the ankle, but with my jeans on, you couldn't tell. And we were in California, so we went to a club up in Los Angeles. It was like a famous cowboy club, and it was almost like that same scene from Eddie Murphy's Beverly Hills Cop, I believe it was. Or if it down, it was the 48 Hours. It was 48 Hours, I believe. I walk into this bar, and they're playing original country. I'm talking like Grand Ole Opry stuff, and the music stops. And everybody looks at me, and I'm thinking, I can't fight all these rednecks. So I'm looking at Jeff. He goes, don't worry, man, you with me. I'm thinking, yeah, but it's like 40-1 in here.
Yeah, right.
So the music starts again. The bartender says, what you want? And then this little old guy walks up to me and goes, we got both kinds of music in here. You should be fine. And I thought, okay, here's the punchline. He goes, we got country and Western. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And he goes, and I love soul music as long as, what's the only black guy that was singing country back then, was singing. And I started singing his song. He goes, you know about him? And I was like, yeah, thanks to this jarhead right here. And he goes, you guys in the Marines? And I said, yeah. And then the music continued and everybody was fine. I didn't die that day, so it was an interesting dynamic, which I had to pay him back. We rode a bus to Compton the next weekend.
Wow, okay.
And even with his cowboy hat on and his boots, it was funny.
What year approximately was this?
81.
81, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been a bit of a culture shock for him as well.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Because even in Compton, even the McDonald's had like Motown theme. So there was like,
oh really?
People with afros and bell bottoms like painted on the walls and stuff. Everything was like funkadelic. It was It was a whole lot different for Jeff. He had to like adapt or die. I mean, it was. He didn't talk because he knew better. He was like, because I always say the wrong thing, don't I, Blanchard? And I was like, yeah, you do. So just shut your face before you get us beat down.
Right.
But still, but we learned together. Yeah,
and you have to give both of you credit to put yourselves in those situations, right? I mean, that's a big ask of someone, I would say.
Yeah, but it changed me forever. I mean, because I still to this day, I know who Tennessee Williams and Hank Williams Jr. and Sr. And I know some people, Conway Twitty. I know George Strait. I know some people that it blows my family's mind. They're like, oh, that's right. Dad listens to everything.
Interesting. So let's go with that for a second. How much pushback have you had from the Black community on some of this stuff? You know, you've been doing podcasting for a long time now, and you've been putting your personality that, as we've discussed, is kind of in the middle, and you try to reach out to both sides. What have you experienced from the Black community on some of this stuff?
Respect, actually. Nobody says anything to my face, but I know there's power in being a segregationalist. If I were to, when I first started the gun club I had, it was the African American gun club called the 10th Cavalry Gun Club. It was for blacks only, even though I didn't say that, but it was to get African Americans involved in the shooting sports. There was a lot of push to stay black, to make sure we don't bring anybody in. And I knew from the beginning that was a mistake, but I knew that the power of being, monolithic or being focused or whatever can grow your numbers really fast. But I also knew that when you tried to outdo that thing, when you wanted to grow bigger than your neighborhood or your community, you had to be inclusive. And I wanted my people to be inclusive. I wanted them to experience outdoor ranges. I wanted them to be able to shoot at competitions that had like moving targets they probably never seen before, stuff that I had been privy to in other jobs. So I thought the only way to do that was to open the doors and be for everybody. And they wasn't really happy with it, but some said, okay, you do you, and we'll just be here. Like, we were the first gun club invited into the National Rifle Association's range in Fairfax when they opened up back in the 90s. And of course, they used the propaganda. They took pictures. They did video. There was a show of, like 40 black people shooting at their range back in like 91. Somebody got to archive that photo or those pictures. But some didn't want to be in the photograph. They were like still from like the 60s and 70s fear of COINTELPRO and that there was going to be some stuff happening if they get their pictures out there. And I was terrified too, because I was still working for the government and wondering how I was going to be perceived. Just trying to get everybody involved. I knew I had to do it in a roundabout way. So luckily, it continued without me because I couldn't maintain it. It was too much work. People are hard work, man. I had no idea pastoring was so hard of a job. I ended up doing it anyway, but that's what it was. It's basically you're taking care of a team, taking care of a group, making sure everybody's needs is taken care of, and meeting them where they're at and bringing them up. So I figured, all right, if I just do goodwill, they'll see it eventually, or they'll catch it on their way home, like we say in church. You might not get this message now, but when you go home, it might hit you.
Interesting. Gotcha. So you've been playing the long game for a long time.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a strategy, but that was my thing. Yeah.
Lucked into it, huh?
Yeah, I'm the king of, I don't even know what good I'm doing. I'm just planting seeds and trying to do the best I can.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because to me, it seems very clear. And I came to you, fairly recently. I haven't been a huge fan from way back in the day. I mean, I am 28 too. So, when you were first starting it, I was probably too young to even know what podcasts were, honestly. So, it's interesting to me. I guess the human aspect, is the most difficult to deal with, and they require that long game. Do you think so, or?
Oh, totally. It kind of, it mirrors religion to me in some ways. People ask God for stuff right now, but say if you don't believe in a creator, an infinite being, and you just said it was a person that lived in our time period. If you ask somebody who knows better, that knows that if I just don't say anything right now, this person's going to figure it out. the lesson will be better taught. You can't say that all the time, but you just don't answer back. So, or if you've played every position on a board, you're playing chess, and you say, all right, this guy's moving that knight way too much time. He should be developing his other pieces. When you're playing it, you can't tell. But if you've been around a while, or you've mastered that part of the game, you know. And sometimes your job is not to interrupt the learning process. Just let them go ahead and fall, and they'll pick themselves up. They'll catch up to you eventually. You hope they make it. Or somebody watching will learn from their mistakes.
Gotcha. Now that's a perfect kind of transition to, again, one reason I really wanted to do this, to introduce you to a new generation, people around my age. And I think that is an important lesson that, lessons in life are hard fought sometimes, and you will get your knight knocked down over and over and over again. Right. And that there is a lot of value in watching someone play or hearing about them play, right? So to me, you've played for a long time. You've been playing chess in this analogy for a long, long time. So I think that while particularly people in my generation won't agree with you on everything, I think that the hard-fought lessons that you've experienced are still of value to anybody, even if they don't agree with you. And I want to use that as a transition to Christianity. I know a lot of people my age, me as well, honestly, I don't have really any, I hate to say interest because that sounds so callous to say that, but I don't have really any interest in Christianity in my life right now. And I was nervous when I first started talking to you because of that, honestly. I was a little like, ooh. I mean, I've considered myself an atheist in my life. At this point, I consider myself an agnostic because I don't consider myself smart enough to definitively say that anything is not there. So I remain ready to be convinced, but that has not happened yet. Speak to how you connect with people, because it's such a integral part of your faith. I mean, you are a pastor, you're a Reverend Kenn Blanchard. How do you connect with people who aren't believers right now, or who don't necessarily want to have a lot to do with Christianity at the moment? Do you find that hard, or do you find it as easy as anybody else connecting with that you don't necessarily agree on a certain issue?
Probably some of the latter. But I also know that there is, because I believe what I believe, I am who I am. If I did not have this faith thing, I would be hell. And I tell you why. One of the things that I really, really liked after I learned that all people were strange and funny and had all these different quirks was I wanted to study people. So I became, how people go to the mall and people watch? Mm-hmm. I did it to the 10th degree. I actually took a notebook. I watched human reaction to stuff.
Interesting.
When I went to boot camp, I kept a journal, but it wasn't on the daily activities of becoming a Marine. It was on how the drill instructors were going to break down each person, because I had done research before I got there, knowing that they seek out different archetypes of people, and they're going to make you all one person. So I've watched that, and then that book got confiscated, of course, when they found out what I was doing.
Gotcha.
And then later, when I became interested in becoming the greatest lover of all time, I started following a couple of guys who were like the pickup kings, and I studied them. I watched them work in bars and nightclubs. I watched them lie to women. I watched them say crazy stuff, and watch how women interacted with them. I became infatuated with the power of persuasion and selling snake oil. And so now I'm really, really, what's a good word? I'm protective of people when I know that they're being sold something that I know is not real. So even though Christianity has been used to the opiate of the masses, as Mark said, or it works real good for poor people. There's been a whole bunch of stuff that if you're a smart person, you don't need God, all that kind of thing. I know for a fact from at least 4 or 5 incidents where I shouldn't be here because it was divine intervention. I know for a fact that if this invisible sky buddy, this God, this thing that nobody, they call it other things, man, I almost got hit by a truck, but something told me to step back. I call that something my God. That spirit that dwells in me allows me to function like this, allows me to have compassion for people. Because I've seen it where you can be a really, really good person up to a point. That point, when you cross over it, you go backwards. When you hold this faith that I have and that I talk about or not talk about, I try to just exude it, try to just be it. It keeps me in check, knowing that it's kind of like when you have the right to carry and you could shoot them, but you don't. What keeps you from doing it? What keeps you from shooting more than once after they're down? It's something that is intangible. That little piece, I've learned to dwell in that zone that makes me still cry at stuff, still weep for other people, care about people that have nothing to do with me. It's a compassion that's not human, because the human part is selfish. The human part, even on your best day, you'll fall. But I got a buffer that nobody can see, but I know it's there because it's been there for so many different things in my life. So I try to live that maybe somebody can say, all right, I'm not quite sure about this God thing, but it's working for you. How can I get some of that? And that's the point where I actually will start talking.
Interesting. Can you talk to how because you said that you were very interested in how people worked and watching people and even, the pickup artist thing where you're, I won't say taking advantage of women, but
yeah,
that you're, okay. All right. Well, you said it, not me then. What changed? When was the point where you said, I'm not going to do this anymore? Or did something, would you say some sort of Holy Spirit got into you? Or, talk about your transition from that to Christianity.
It took a while. I mean, it was kind of like you can be introduced to something and then you go, okay, I hear what you're saying. I see you guys in church. I hear the old people, but I ain't feeling none of that right now. But then I had my experience the first time, and then it happened again the second time, and then the third time. And these experiences. You
mean like in church? Like you had an experience? No,
there could be anywhere. Like I remember once, I was riding from Disneyland back to base, and on my motorcycle, was tired. I mean, bone tired, and I'm going up this ramp a good 80 miles an hour. And I got to the turn, you get the little yellow signs where it says sharp turn. You probably should be doing like 35.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that sign, I was doing 80. And I saw the barricade ahead of me. I thought, dynamically, if I hit the brakes right now, I'm going over this rail. I'll just slow my roll, but I'm going over this rail. If I lay this bike down, the inertia is going to push me right into this rail. Either way, I'm hitting this rail. So in that moment, when your life flashes before you, all that I can remember was my grandmother saying, they that call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. So I said, all right, this is I ain't questioning nothing right now. I was like, Lord, it was kind of like, in short, if you're there, help me. My right hand got hot, like it was on fire. And I felt my whole hand collapse on my throttle and give it more gas, which I didn't know what was going on. It was all seconds. But I sped up and defied gravity and did a right turn at probably 90 miles an hour. on this ramp and survived. I mean, I scraped the bottom of my boot. The leather came off, the foot peg, it scraped down to the metal. I mean, I did a perfect turn, high speed on a touring bike that I'd never been trained to do, because I learned later that speed is a better controller of your dynamics than hitting brakes and all that stuff. I had to go do a physics lesson, a vehicle dynamics thing, because I couldn't believe that this is happening to me, but I survived this thing. And I came off of it, rolled down to the highway, pulled over, and just sat there and tried to like recreate what had just happened. It's like, all right, a minute ago I thought I was going to die, and I just called out to God, and this thing touched me, and I'm looking at my hand like, that just happened, but nobody will believe me. So I'm not telling anybody, and I'm still here. So off I go, right? Well, so now you guys are hearing that story, but it's little things like that happen a few times when you're like, all right, maybe there's something to this. So later, I'm older, and my life, I had done everything I was big enough to do. I had created the gun club. I was the black man with a gun. I wrote a book and everything, but I actually bankrupted my family, and I was in financial trouble. My job was thinking about canning me because they wasn't sure whether I was a risk to the government, being pro-gun and all that stuff, and financially also a risk for getting blackmailed by foreign power or something. So all that was going on, and I went to a funeral of my aunt. I just found out that she died, and she went to this big old Baptist church in DC. So I got there late. Funeral was over. They were already at the cemetery. People were downstairs eating already, the repast. So I walked into the church and sat on the front pew, looked around, and thought, man, it's been a long time since I've been in a place like this. You know what? I think I need to be here. And I just started talking to God. And then I walked out. Somebody said, hey, man, did you find everything okay? And I was like, yep, I did what I came to do. I got to get myself back together. And it was about a couple of weeks later that I ended up started working for the church as a janitor. And I figured at least I didn't burst into flames when I was in here. So I might be okay. Get a job, get my finances back together. And every day something happened when I was working there that brought me closer to the realization that God was real and that I had a purpose and that he could use even somebody like me with all my issues. And it just slowly got me back together.
Interesting. There's a lot there. I mean, multiple signs almost that you.
Yeah, it takes me more than one time to get stuff together. I mean, I'm a little slow like that. I don't. You can split the sky open, and I'm still gonna go. Yeah, maybe that's just some phenomenon. So when somebody else tells me, yeah, I don't believe that stuff yet, I'm thinking, yeah, I remember that. I was that dude.
Interesting. And so you empathize with that person even more because you were there, right? Yep. I got so many stories of Ken almost leaving out of here. I remember once I was living with these guys. We had a house together, and I was my first time, being in a house, and I washed my clothes for the first time, not being, on my own, and I wanted to hang my clothes up outside. So we had to rig a what do you call that thing? Clothesline. Because yeah.
that stuff's like antiquity. Nobody has those anymore. But my grandmother, she had these things, and she always says, "Make your clothes smell fresh" and all that stuff, right? So I had to go look hard for some wooden clothespins. I had to go like on a quest for these things. They were like unreal. Nobody makes these things. Well, anyway, I got them, and I hung my clothes up, and they were out there blowing and drying, and I was all happy, proud, like I had done some work, And the storm came out of nowhere. And my stuff was getting wet. So I ran outside, and I'm snatching clothes off these things. The pins are flying up everywhere. And I'm thinking I'm going to lose half of my pins. And I had this giant pile of white clothing in my face. I couldn't see. So I'm running back to the door. We had like a little mud room. I opened the screen door, and my sock that was on top, right at my eye level, it feels like a wind bust just plucked it right off. So I'm looking down as I'm holding this thing. I'm like, look at that, right in the mud. It was like this, like right by the drain, this green mossy stuff. My white sock that I just took to clean had to fell, right? So then I felt this hot hand again push me. So I ducked to pick up the sock. I'm thinking, who in the hell gonna push me, right? Well, right when I bent over, a ball of lightning came right behind me, hit the screen door, and that little room is probably like 2 by 2 between the screen and the other door to go to our little kitchen. Exploded. So the thunder happened inside the house.
Whoa.
I was deaf and blind for probably about 10 minutes. Of course, I dropped everything because I couldn't hear or see. And I remember having some hands, and my roommates was grabbing me and pulling me into the kitchen. They're like, are you burned? And I couldn't really hear them, but I could feel their wrist, like doing like assessment, see if I was all right. And I was like in shock because all I could hear was the ringing, that sound that you hear, like if you have to shoot somebody, is that sound that just blocks out everything. It's like that. That's all I heard, right? So I'm just standing there like, what just happened to me? So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, eyesight and ears all came back. Went kind of like, whoop, and I was like, bam, I was right back. And I'm looking at these guys, and they're like, are you still here? And I'm like, yeah, man, I can see you now. And they're like, look what happened. I turned my head, and there was like a burning hole in the screen.
Oh, wow.
Where the lightning had hit, where my head was. And they said, how did that happen? And I said, man, I don't know. And then as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about my sock and my clothes. I'm thinking, what was that warm feeling that pushed me? So then I thought, all right, I am the luckiest dude in the world twice. I just kind of cataloged that away until it happened, a couple more times. Different things happened in my life that I felt there was a presence, that there was somebody else there, that there was, after a while, I got kind of cocky. Like when I got married, I told my wife I have a guardian angel, and I used to call him, I forgot what that name I gave that guy, something crazy like Seymour or something. I was like, Seymour is probably here. She was like, who in the heck is Seymour? I was like, that's my guardian angel. He's protecting me through a whole bunch of stuff. So she's like, oh, you shouldn't play with that stuff, right? So it was like this joke, because I still wasn't a church guy, I was just fortunate, just lucky.
Yeah. Right. So that's interesting that you were chalking it up to maybe divine intervention without being, a churchgoer kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because I had never heard anybody else ever say that. Nobody ever said, this stuff happened to them, or you just go to church every Sunday, you do whatever, and you go home, and I see the same people not change. Well, after a while, I took that same thing I had with checking out people with religion. I wanted to know about this God thing. I wanted to know how he was worshiped. So for a year, I went to a different church every Sunday. And it was like my class on theology. I was going to learn how God is worshiped and whatever. And then I'll pick from there, because I had grown up Southern Baptist and African-American traditions. I wanted to know how everybody else thought about God. That was an amazing journey of a year. The music was different in some places. The instruments or no instruments, the prayers, the liturgy, the dynamic, how people treated God, acted toward God. And I even went to a group that was probably close to be Satan worshipers. They got the cutest chicks too, by the way.
For all you listeners out there who want to know, Go to a devil worshiper
Yeah,
meeting, apparently.
yeah. They're like wearing like no clothes. They are hot, but that feeling is a whole lot different from the other feeling.
Hmm. It sounds like you were kind of the religious Bruce Lee then. You were going around figuring out what works for people, what's the most effective.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way. I've never heard anyone say that they, I think frequently religious people will say that it was divine that they found the church, or it was destiny, or it was, it seems like it's this big thing, this big, huge event where they found Christianity. So I think it's, for a lot of us who are not into the Christianity thing right now, I think that the big event kind of turns us off, because it's like, I've never had a big event like that. I've never had this revelation. And I don't see myself, but all these little things that start adding up to something is much more my speed. Like if I was going to go back to church, I don't particularly believe in this big revelation that, oh, hey, I got to get into church. But I could see that after a while and certain circumstances and certain experiences like you had, where it was like, well, these things are challenging my preconceived notions about the church. And, maybe I'll check it out. Maybe I'll start doing something. Maybe I'll expand that part of my, consciousness to allow something like that in. So I think I think that that's important for people to know too, that you as a reverend didn't come to Christianity as a big event. It wasn't a life-changing, a single life-changing day or something. It was gradual over time, and you took convincing. I think that that's important to know too. Like, you weren't, for lack of a better term, drinking the Kool-Aid right away. You weren't jumping headfirst into this. You got the janitor job first, and you started watching people grow and evolve in the church. And that's a small community that you can keep tabs on and say, oh, so-and-so is doing a lot better. I see that. I can understand that. And you can understand their thoughts and their wants and their problems too at a much more, certain churches are several thousand people big, but I would imagine that churches you were going to back in the day were nowhere near that size. So you could kind of, keep tabs on people in not a nefarious way. Obviously, it was for good reasons, but I think that would affect me a lot, to see people growing and improving themselves and, believing in something and trusting in it. I think trust is a really hard thing maybe for my generation, because a lot of us feel like we've only been screwed since we turned 18, basically.
Explain that.
I was born in 1991, so, like I said, 28 years, I'll be 29 this year, and I graduated high school in 2010, right after the biggest, market crash in the nation's modern history. And then shortly after that, we had a sort of, we had the bubble, and then, the economic, it kind of depends on when you're talking about in the 2010s. And I have not, for a lot of that, I was 21 early 20s and partying a lot and not really paying attention to. So, my recollection of those years is not the greatest, but I think that there's been many, many government scandals. There's been a lot of, I can only think of things more recently right now, but the Jeffrey Epstein thing, where we were, this cabal of child molesters is thrown in our face. And, the conspiracy theorists have been saying this for a long time. And in this case, it turned out to be basically true. He had a freaking private island to touch kids on. It's hard for me to put my trust in either people or institutions at this point. And frankly, it takes a lot for me to go ahead and believe in something these days, because I've seen so many examples of that going wrong. Bernie Madoff. People believed in Bernie Madoff, right? And
Lost everything.
right. I mean, people are so good at convincing people, and it's hard. I have to kind of check myself a lot these days and say, what do I believe? Do I believe that this situation is actually going on right now? Like, if you had asked me about the Jeffrey Epstein thing before the second conviction, I would have said, yeah, man, like maybe a couple people, but it's not that, it's not as organized, or it's not as, as advanced as the conspiracy theorists would say. And yet, when confronted with the evidence, well, now I certainly can't say that that's not true, because it is most definitely true. So, how do you deal with trust these days? How do you deal with who to trust, what to trust? Because I'll lump people and institutions in the same thing. I don't trust Coca-Cola, for example. They're putting a bunch of crap and all they care about is selling an extra can of Coke every year. How do you deal with that? It's such a duplicitous kind of thing. It kind of runs me down.
Here's the part that's gonna really, really mess you up. When I started working for the church, that's when I saw how jacked up the church was. I saw people who didn't want to help anybody. I saw people who were only trying to just skim off the top of stuff. People who were taking advantage of people. Because remember, I studied human behavior too, so I knew a scammer when I saw it. And I didn't want to be one of those preachers. I didn't want to be anything like those people. So I have the same trust issues you have with organizations, with people. For the most part, I don't believe anybody unless they're vetted through me, myself.
Interesting.
But what I learned to trust was God. I learned to trust in what I couldn't see. I had to learn to trust in my faith that when I wake up this morning, you and me going to go together, and whatever happened, you're going to get some glory out of this thing. It's going to be a benefit, and I'm going to see a benefit from it. And it's never how I intended it to be. That's how I know it's him. Like, I give an example. It was one time this guy called me and said, I want to have you in this film with me, and I'm going to do a documentary. And I thought, oh man, this is awesome. I've been trying to get to this point my whole life. I want to be in the movies. And 8 months went by. I didn't hear from this guy. One Saturday morning, he calls me and goes, okay, I'm here. And I said, here where? And who is this? He says, this is Larry. I'm here. I mortgaged my house. I got a film crew. We're at the range. We're waiting on you. And I thought, I'll be right there. So I drove like a bullet, like 45 minutes to this outdoor range up in Maryland. And he had a whole film crew out there. He says, yeah, I had to pay all these guys for you being late. And we're having this interview, and you're a very important part of this documentary. And I thought, this was the wrong time to be on Color People's time. Please, I'm so sorry, dude. I didn't know you were serious. And oh man, I had to keep that dude from punching me in the face. So when the filming started, I was over the top, man. I had tried to give that guy everything I had to be worthy of him waiting on me. But when it was all over that day, he says, one thing you told me about was that you were a reverend now, and in this gun thing. And I got some stuff I want to talk about. If I could trust you, I need to get it off my chest. And right then I knew that was the real reason for me knowing him. Had nothing to do with the movie, the documentary. My job was to minister to this guy. Now, you don't know where he could go or what he could do. What he does might inspire somebody to cure cancer or something. But my job that day was to be the church that he could never go into. My job that day was to be a pastor, a person representing God, to listen, to hear another human being going through some stuff that a therapist didn't have chance enough to set an appointment for. And whatever happens, this was my time. This was the reason I was sent here. Had nothing to do with this film. So when the film went through, it got published. It didn't win in the competition that he was in, but I felt like I had done what I was supposed to do. It had nothing to do with the movie. It was to be his confidant, his preacher, his priest. And maybe I saved him from jumping off a cliff. I don't know. But that is the difference between when it's a God thing and it's a us thing. Sometimes it has bigger implications than we give it credit for. And we're looking at it for one thing, and it has something totally different in mind. So somebody told me once that you want to be the church. You might be the only Bible somebody reads today. So that has been my purpose with all my bumps and grinds. And the good thing is the Lord talks to each person differently. He knows I need graphic novel stuff. I need to be dramatically inspired. Because I'm gonna either narrate a story or write or paint this thing out on what happened to me so that other people can see it. So I get the flowery stories. I get the burning bush things. But some people a little smarter than me don't need that. They just need to hear it or feel the presence of God in their life, and they get it without having to almost die, get hit by lightning, run off a cliff. I mean, so it just depends on the person. And sometimes we put things in order, out of order. We don't know what just happened was God. We don't give it credit, but it didn't have to happen.
Right. I guess that's a major component of faith, right? I mean, it's right there in the name. You gotta have faith, keep your faith, or trust in your faith. Maybe is that?
And you don't need much. It can be a little bit. Don't have to be walking on water faith. It can be just a little bit. That all right. Maybe there's something more to my life. Maybe I should just hang on a little bit longer. That the storm is not going to last forever.
That's interesting because that, again, I think represents a lot of people my own ages, feel about religion. It feels like you have to jump in with both feet and just believe everything first day. And if you don't, then people are going to judge you, in the church are going to judge you for not believing everything first day and say, hey, this is my holy book. This is my holy beliefs. Why are you only dipping your toe? Like, this is not that's not acceptable to us kind of thing. Do you have you seen that before too?
Oh, totally. We got the most judgmental people in the world, and we have no heaven to kick you out of or no hell to put you in. But we judging you hard though, because you don't dress like we do, and we don't look like. So like right now, the whole world is having to, especially a lot of churches in this area, are having to do virtual services. They can't do business as usual, and it's freaking them out. Some of them, it took a while for them to get themselves together. But I've been existing in this realm for a long time because I know that the church is not a building. The church is not made of walls. It's made of people. We are the bricks. And when I was doing street corner evangelism or doing stuff at biker rallies or at ranges, I know who sent me there. And if I can just save one, I'm doing my job. And it kind of translated to when I do firearms instruction, when I was talking about the Second Amendment, that everybody listening for a different thing. Some people are looking to be justified. Some people are listening to criticize. Some people are listening to find a hole in your argument. But there's somebody who, they like what you're saying. They never thought of it that way. And the way you put it, they're going to do their own evaluation. And I look for that person. I got those in the front row that might be judging. I got those in the back row who only hear a part of what I'm saying. But there's somebody that I'm supposed to talk to that wants to be saved. And that's my audience. Now, go. And that's where I'm at.
Gotcha. I mean, not to toot your horn too much, but I would say that I was kind of like that. I was kind of, we connected over social media, and I had, kind of a vague knowledge of you. But then I appreciated you just kind of putting information out there and letting me come to it, essentially. You weren't trying to preach to me, or you weren't trying to throw it in my face. You weren't trying to push me in any direction. It was just kind of like, hey, this is what I've experienced. This is, and that's why I wanted to do this episode too, for other people to hear what you've experienced, and other people, we've had some of these kind of conversations before, and I think that it is valuable for other people to hear. So yeah, I think that I am a perfect example of someone who wouldn't normally be into the church stuff, or wouldn't normally be into some of the stuff you talk about, but because of your delivery and because of your attitude of, I'm going to put this out there, and if just one person hears it, then that's enough. And I think that connected with me, and I think that it can connect with other people too. So that's why I'm really pleased and really passionate, I guess, about helping your message and helping your attitude get out there in the world. I do believe in how you're talking about things, and I believe in, sure, we might have differences on religion or this or that, but I believe in the way you're talking about things. And I think that going forward in our country, that's going to be really, really, really important, because all we have right now are people screaming at each other. And I think that a lot of people are getting turned off by that and are looking and wishing for someone else to start talking about things and putting a positive spin on it, but being okay with, yeah, there's a lot of darkness in the world too. You can't be everything for everybody, but you can be the go-to guy for a lot of people out there. So kind of transitioning into the future, then we've talked about some of your journey. I'm sure we could sit here and talk for 6 hours, but in the interest of podcast time,
this is the longest interview I've ever had in my life, too, man. I didn't just realize how long we've been talking.
I know it's just been flowing off your tongue, right? Like it's cool just to sit here and talk. And for people to listen and just hear these voices in their headphones and mull over what we're saying here. But we've heard a little bit of your story, not all, of course. And I think subsequent episodes maybe will dive into more specific parts of it. But where do you want this to go? What is why? You've been doing this how many years now? Over 13 years, the Black Man with a Gun podcast, 12, 13.
This makes the 13th year right here.
13th year. There you go. What keeps you going? What do you want to accomplish with this? What is and maybe it's not totally fleshed out in your head right now, because I think, like you were saying, you're kind of spreading apple seeds and we'll see what grows. So, I don't expect a 3-page answer on this, that is fully fleshed out, but what's your kind of overall goal, and where do you want to take this?
This is what brought me back. I was pretty happy that I had concluded the podcast after 12 years. And I thought, all right, I've done all I can do. I'm going to let it ride, and I'm not going to cut the podcast off in case people still want to listen to it. But eventually, if nobody, supporting it, then it has to go away. But I remember something my uncle told me when I was a little kid, and I was trying to find myself and trying to find my place in the world. And he gave me some encouragement. He goes, this was in the 60s. I mean, Dr. King was still living. And he says, you're going to be great one day. People are going to listen to you, and you're going to be like King. And I thought, wow, that's like awesome when a little kid hears that, and King was like the man at the time. But as I grew up, I was nowhere close to that. Just recently, as I turned like 58, I got emails from people saying, man, we miss your voice. We miss your jokes. We miss the calm. We miss the history. We miss what you used to do. And everybody's nuts. And we need that Ken to come back. And I thought, that Ken is frustrated. That Ken can't help anybody. And then I remember my uncle with that King analogy. And King said something, I can't quote it right now, but he says, if I can help somebody who's going the wrong way, if I can help somebody It's a whole thing about if I can just help one person. And I thought, man, that's my own words modified. I didn't know I was carrying that thing for so long. I was stuck on the influencer and the making money and the podcast and becoming like a radio show and being famous. And no, if I can help one person, then maybe I can, that's all my part is, to change the world. So I'm back just for that, to help that one person that needs solid voice. Somebody who has been there, done that, bought a t-shirt, survived some crazy stuff, and not ashamed to tell you, I've screwed up some stuff, man. I've got some boo-boos in my life, but I'm saved by the grace of God. So that leniency, that grace, I'm glad to share it. And even though you might not find it in the walls of a church, you'll hear it here. You'll get it from me if you call, if you email. Made myself available to be that guy, to be, if King had a podcast, this would be it.
Gotcha. So I think, one thing that we've been discussing is how to get more people here. I think that it's easy to try to get more listeners for more, just exactly like you were saying, for more fame, for more money, for more influence, for more this or that, right? And that might be why someone is going after listenership. I think it's different here, though. And I think it's different because of that attitude that you just said, if it helps one person. And that makes for really, really powerful content, I guess, for lack of a better word. It makes for really powerful topics of conversation and outreach, and people can feel that. At the same time, if you're not getting more listeners, though, how many people, maybe you have to be in front of a lot of people for you to even find that one person that you can help, right? So I think it's a fine line between, just saying we need more listeners and, or maybe it's not a fine line. Maybe it's why we need more listeners, why we're going after more people, why we're going after different people. Because frankly, the show hasn't been aimed at millennials so far. It's been aimed at older folks, maybe of certain political bent, but it hasn't been aimed at a younger audience, a new generation, a new listenership. So I don't want it to come across as just pure vanity or pure egomaniacal, just needing more listeners. I think that the point of getting more listeners is to get in front of people that can hear your message. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about this, in that the best advertising is word of mouth, hands down. It always has been. I think it always will be. Not Facebook ads, not Google ads, not search engine optimization. If you hear somebody say, hey, I really like this show and I really believe in what Ken is saying and I want you to hear it too, this being a listener to a prospective listener, that's the best thing listeners can do for you right now, is tell somebody about this. Share it on your Facebook page, sure. But I think the real sitting down and someone saying, hey, maybe you're not a Christian, maybe you're not a gun person, maybe you're not on the conservative side of the middle of the road, maybe you don't think that anything Ken is saying is something you want to hear. Challenge them to listen, and just give it one episode and pick your favorite episode and say, listen to this one. And, the listener will have a reason for that particular episode connected with them in a certain way. This is one that I'm going to send out to a lot of people and say, hey, look, I had the opportunity to interview this guy and speak about these things, from a younger millennial point of view. I want you to get introduced to this guy because I do think that middle of the road and trying to extend your hand to each side and, trying to do this is really important. I get really discouraged a lot listening to the news, reading the news, following current events. I frequently, and I'll text you and just be like, dude, this is tough. What are we doing here? And I know that you felt that a little bit too. I was listening, right? So, I think that it is important for people who do believe in your message to try to do what outreach they can. And it doesn't have to be Patreon subscription, though that helps. It doesn't have to be buying you a cup of coffee on your website, but that helps. The number one thing people can do is share the show. Share either this one, Black Man with a Gun, or I don't want to say too much, but there might be some other shows percolating out there that may or may not be brought back. And I think that there will be one thing that I'm working on is more and more avenues for people to discover you that may not be comfortable with guns, may not be comfortable with your conservative point of view or leaning conservative point of view, I would say. Because it's not for individual groups of people. I think it's for everybody. So, and I think Dr. King was also, or also had that goal in mind. He didn't oust white people from marching with him. He didn't exclude people who wanted to help. And I think that that's really important. And that seems to be a lot of what's going on in maybe popular media, mass media, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to make sure that we said, hey, the number one people who can help, if you believe in this message, the number one people who can help are the listeners. If you're listening to this right now and you believe in what we're saying, please share it with somebody.
And that's one thing that your age group gets. I mean, you guys march together. You guys will call somebody out together on social media. There's a dude with a nose ring. There's another dude with blue hair. And there's a woman with pink hair, and you guys are all sharing the same stuff. Man, 20 years ago, you had to be exactly like the group that you were in. There was no sharing. There was no collectiveness. You guys are more us than us. No, believe it or not, being as diverse as you are.
Boy, I am heartened that you say that, though. I don't know. I personally know a lot of people who are not trying to reach out. And they do not, and they're in my own age, and on both sides too, where, one of the reasons I want to help and be involved with you and your brand and all this stuff is I want to nip it in the bud, so to speak. And I'm starting to see the individual groups segregating in my generation, and people who are not tolerant of another point of view, even if they might agree on 90% of something. That extra 10% is what frankly makes them hate somebody else. And if you hate somebody else, you'll never try to see it from their point of view. You just won't. Why would you try to see the point of view of a Nazi if you hate them? Right. Yeah. And I get that hate. I don't have any room for that kind of ideology myself. But if you disenfranchise those people and you don't try to reach out, they will only dig their heels in more too.
There's safety and there's safety in numbers. So folks who are afraid, there's all fear. All those who are afraid are bond together to keep people who look like them together.
Right. And if it's an abhorrent ideology like Nazism or white supremacy or something, if you don't, there's a famous guy, Daryl Davis, jazz musician or blues musician, something like that, who's converted. He has over 200 KKK robes in his closet or something of people that he has gone to bars and struck up conversations with and said, hey, why do you believe this stuff? And he's a black guy. I don't know if I mentioned that, but why do you believe this stuff? And frequently they'll say like, oh, well, I don't hate you because I know you. And it's like, yeah, dude, there you go. Okay. It's not that difficult to extrapolate that out to other people who are black. Okay. But it just shows the individual, and sure, somebody might say, oh, well, 200, like there's 5,000 KKK members. So, you only got 200 or something. Well, that's 200 less people who are going to spread hate in the world, and 200 less families, if they have a family, who are going to go on to believe that ideation, or they start spreading that to their group of friends too, and being like, yeah, I'm not into that stuff anymore, man. Like I know a black guy and he's just like me. And I mean, a lot of us say, duh, like why did it take you so long to get there? But people are on different journeys, are on different paths. And we don't have to accept we don't have to be happy with how they think, but we do have to accept that that's where they are right now, I think. And by accepting that, it starts the conversation to change. Because if you don't accept that, then you won't talk with them, and then nothing will change.
Absolutely right.
So to me, this is a big part of this project too, is reaching out to people who don't necessarily think like us, who are on the more liberal side of the middle of the road, who don't necessarily like guns, who don't, want to hear a black guy who likes country music, who don't. This might challenge their preconceived notions as well. But yeah, I think it's important to try to talk to people that we don't necessarily agree with right now, because that's the only way conversation is going to happen.
You got it.
So this is that's a big part of it. Do you have anything else you wanted to throw in here before we wrap things up? Your longest interview ever? I
just remembered that's those words from Martin Luther King were actually from a song of his favorite gospel star, Mahalia Jackson, and her song was called "If I Can Help Somebody," and it goes, "If I can help somebody as I travel along, if I can help somebody with a word or a song, if I can help somebody from doing wrong, then my living shall not be in vain." And I didn't know that was my mantra until today. So now I'm going to keep that posted on my phone to remember that.
Yeah, there you go. Gotcha. All right. Well, Kenn, I appreciate you sitting down and talking with me today, and I hope this is the first of many. Again, I think that if you're a listener right now and you believe in anything that we're saying or parts of it, or you're uncomfortable with parts, that's okay. That's good. And that's challenging your preconceived notions as well. And maybe you decide, nah, I don't agree with those guys on a couple things here and there. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. And maybe we'll come around to your point of view at some point, or maybe we'll change our mind. I mean, you've been upfront about you're not the end all be all of knowledge, and you're not done learning, which I think is really, really important. A lot of people get stuck and say like, well, I know enough at this point. My opinions are pretty well formed at this point, so I don't need to challenge them that much. And if everybody does that, then we will never get any progress at all. So if you do believe in even a fraction of what we've said today, share this show. Tell people about it. Tell people that, yeah, sure, it says black man with a gun if they're not into guns, but say, doesn't really this episode in particular doesn't really have a lot to do with it, with guns. Or say, hey, I know you're not that interested in guns, but this guy has a different perspective on it. And I think you should hear it, even if you disagree at the end of the day, too. That's okay, too. We have to be okay with that kind of stuff to make any kind of progress forward. So, I would just say, please share, please like the Facebook page, follow on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. All of those little things. A lot of people say like, oh, my one little like on Facebook doesn't matter. But as we start growing and as the numbers start growing, that helps us get out to more people too. And people that might not necessarily agree. We've talked about actually advertising or going after groups of people who specifically don't agree. And, that maybe we only get 2 people from that entire group, but that's still 2 people. Just like you were saying, individual people matter, and we got to try to bring everybody along on an individual basis. So, I think that's pretty much it from me.
If somebody wanted to contact you, how could they reach out to you too?
Um, probably Analytic Endeavors is the Facebook page for my podcast. We're on a break right now for in between seasons 1 and 2, but we're starting to get some guests lined up for season 2, so that'll be going. You could like that page and send me a message there. I'll have to get a better contact that we can give out to people so they can reach out as well. But for now, probably like the page and send me a message there if you'd like. You can also send Reverend Kenn a message addressed to me. I'll find it at some point. So however you want to reach out is perfectly fine with me.
And we're going to hit some other topics as well. Today was really big on what I thought about religion and stuff. But there's there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's the gay, lesbian, bi, trans world. There's the healthcare. There's pet stuff. I mean, there's just so much junk that we fight about. We're going to fight about it all together if you stick around.
That sounds good to me, Ken.
All right, guys. Man, thank you so much, man, for hanging out. The longest episode ever. Nic, thank you, man.
Of course. I'm looking forward to doing it again.
They have tried to divide us, but you are held strong. You have neighbors and family that don't know how cool you are, but I do. Help me and support this podcast. Help me be the goodwill ambassador for our side. Nobody likes to start over. Together, we can do this thing. Go to patreon.com/blackmanwithagun. Did you get it? patreon.com/blackmanwithagun. All right, that's it, my friends. And thank you for listening, downloading, and supporting the Black Man with a Gun Show podcast. Feel free to share this show. And if you like what you heard, please support this bro. Now, just in case nobody has told you this today, I love you, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Until next time, shalom, baby.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can show somebody he is traveling around, then my